For many centuries, our society has relied upon you, a jury, for consideration of difficult cases. For hundreds of years, we have recognized that a juror's deliberations, their discussions, and their thoughts and votes should remain their private affair for as long as they wish it. Therefore, the law gives you the unique privilege not to speak about your jury's work.
From the Day in New London, Connecticut, I'm Sten Spinella, and this is Looking for the Todt Family.
Although at this point you are discharged with our thanks for your 6 days of jury service and are at liberty to speak with anyone you choose about your deliberations.
Whenever we are in the throes of reporting on the Todt family tragedy and we figure we have the available information, something else comes up. This time it was Manny Lozada, one of the 12 jurors who put Tony Todt in prison for 4 consecutive life sentences.
Hello.
Hi, Manny.
Yes, hi.
Lozada reached out to us in an attempt to strengthen our story. He found out about the podcast after the trial and was surprised to learn that a lot of information on the Todts was suppressed in the courtroom. He returned the favor for us, letting us learn about the inner machinations of the deliberative body that convicted Tony for murdering his family. What you're about to hear is a lightly edited interview with Lozada and inside information about the case that has never been aired publicly. If we could just start, my first question for you is, what is your general opinion of Tony? And if you could also comment on this, how did the rest of your peers in the jury feel about him?
My personal opinion was that it was all about control. He thought that he would control the entire trial. He had that confidence in him that we could perceive, sort of like going a little bit more into arrogance rather than just plain confidence. He thought that he would manipulate us. In our chambers, we talked about how narcissistic he acted. It was all about him, basically.
Did you ever change your mind during the trial? Like, were there times when you thought maybe Tony was innocent?
I remember in the beginning of actually before the trial started, they handed us a questionnaire, and I remember one of the questions was if there is a pact or an agreement between citizens to take their life if the government should allow that to happen, or something along those lines, something like, in a way to make look like suicide is something that would be sanctioned by the government. That what was our opinion about it, and I said in my answer, I remember I said, well, if they already committed suicide, there's nothing for anyone else to argue. It was painted to us as this was an agreement, but from the get-go, I went with the mindset that, remembering that question, that it was something that they, as a family, thought that there was no way to fix and that there was only one way out. And I felt a little bit of, compassionate about it. And I wanted to hear what the story was. But as it went along, then it became clear that was just a fabrication.
What happened when the jury was deadlocked for about an hour? Like, how did you all end up at that point?
So out of the entire group, we were 14, and 12 out of the 14 were convinced that he was guilty. But 2 of them had doubts about the way that the government or the prosecution presented the case. There were many unanswered questions. So the 2 had doubts. They knew that he was guilty, but they had doubts that the prosecution presented the case beyond a reasonable doubt. At the end of the, when we finally went to deliberate, two people were taken out from the jurors because they were designated as the backups. I think I forgot what the right terminology was, but so one of those individuals that had their doubts, he remained in the group with the final 12, and he basically, that was what kept us for over many hours. It wasn't just 1 hour. I mean, we were for about 7 hours trying to convince him that there were many areas that were not explained to us properly. For example, we had questions about what was in their computers, if was there any search or in the phones, and nothing like that was presented. So he needed that other information in order to paint a more clear picture in his mind. And everybody else, the other 11, we were 100% convinced, because I never bought any of the story of the pact or anything like that. He actually threw that out the window during his testimony.
Wow, that sounds like kind of a tense situation, this sort of like 11-1 scenario. How did you bring the one detractor over to your side?
One of us, actually, there were a couple of us that were trying to strategize ways to paint the picture so that he would not have those doubts, right? And one of the things that we really pondered a lot was the way in which the wife allegedly killed herself. It was not possible for a person to stab herself twice, and they were not lethal wounds anyway. So there had to be more to that. But again, the prosecution did not provide that overwhelming proof to us. So I think what really got him convinced, because after so many hours we were getting frustrated, but what really convinced him to change his mind was somebody said, if we find him guilty, he will have the opportunity to appeal, and if ultimately he was not guilty, he would, that will be cleared. But if he's guilty and we find him not guilty, then he's done, and he's going to be in the streets, and he's going to be, is a guilty person that we just let him out because of one simple technicality. So we could not live with that. I could not live with that.
You've mentioned this a little bit about the jury's impression of the prosecution. What did you think of the legal teams in general? Like, did you think the defense did a good job? Do you think the jury liked one side more than the other?
The defense, I think, in our opinion, I think it was a little bit of a roller coaster, because they allowed him to testify, and that's what really sealed it for us. When he testified, his demeanor, more than his story, his demeanor was like unbelievable. It was when the defense was asking him questions, he would look at us to say the answers, just looking at every single one of us in the eye. When the prosecution asked their questions, he would not even look at us. So his demeanor told us a lot. And he was very antagonistic and belligerent against the prosecution. So we, and that's one of the things that for us we commented that we wanted to really see behind, like in between the lines, what his motives and his demeanor was, because the testimony was conflicting with everything that he said in his confession in the video that they played. So we had to go by more than that. We had to really read him when he was right there in front of us.
Yeah, and I know the prosecution said at the end something about how he was like kind of, remorseful and crying during the defense, but more angry and, like you mentioned, like antagonistic during the prosecution. And I was going to ask you what made you know that Tony was guilty, if something specific happened. It was his testimony, would you say?
Yes.
And like you said, not necessarily even his testimony itself, but his demeanor.
His demeanor, and that helped us make a more complete assessment, because his confession, although for the most part I believe it was correct, it was accurate, but the motives were not. What he said about that pact, or that his wife was sick, none of the family members ever, even after the trial was over, that there was the aunt that spoke there in the sentencing part. She said they had no knowledge of any debilitating illness that she ever had. So all that was made up. Plus, in his own testimony, he exaggerated that and then put all the blame into her. That we did not buy that at all.
Do you think the prosecution did a good job, or do you think you guys came to understand, what you think Tony's motive was for carrying these out?
During the process, we could not understand why there were some areas that were not even explored, like computer searches or phones or things like that. But then after the fact, I understood, because there was something else that was never even mentioned to us, which was he was being investigated for fraud up north. We had no idea at all on those charges. We had no idea that they were federal agents. In fact, we didn't even know that one of the witnesses that they interviewed, that was, we were told that he was a law enforcement agent. I had no idea that he was a federal agent that came from out of state. No idea.
I was going to ask you if you guys were aware of this healthcare fraud investigation, and I'll just tell you, we also found it odd that the jury wasn't even told how police ended up at Tony's house. It was because of that healthcare fraud investigation that they even went inside. They had a warrant for his arrest.
For us, it was the reason was 100% because of the welfare check by his sister. That was what we were told, and we were told nothing else.
How much did you know about the Todt case, and how much, I guess, media about the Todt case did you consume either before, during, or after the trial?
Before the trial, I remember seeing or hearing just the headline, hearing that story about 2 years ago. Nothing more than that. Looking back, I do remember something about fraud being investigated, but at the time of the trial, I completely forgot about that. I had no idea when we were being presented all the evidence. Plus, even if I even thought of that, I could not even bring it up in our discussion because it wasn't presented. So I guess thank goodness that I completely forgot about that, because it was only like a matter of less than a minute headline that I heard or saw or read somewhere, but nothing more than that. Now, during the trial, we were 100% forbidden of looking up anything. So I, kept that, and I did not even discuss it with my wife, which was very, very, um, I guess, traumatizing for me, because the stuff that we were examining, and mainly the pictures of the children, that was very, very, very tough for me, and I could not even express how I felt to my wife. After the trial, the first thing I did when I came home, I asked my wife, "Can you please pull pictures of the family when they were still alive?" Because I never saw them before. And as soon as I saw those faces and the children and wife, I started crying for I don't know how long.
Yeah, that must have been tough. I appreciate you sharing that. And also, that must have been a relief to be able to tell your wife what you were doing for the past week.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't have too many more questions for you, but I am wondering if there were any big disagreements aside from, the deadlock at the end among the jury during deliberation, and what factors of the case did you guys focus on the most?
There were no disagreements. We were a very, very cohesive group. I mean, during the presentation of evidence and all that, we could not discuss it. Even when we were in our room, we could not even discuss that. But after the deliberation started, that's when things started coming up. Like the person that was having his doubts, I don't even remember hearing his voice at all during the previous 6 days. And when he spoke up, he said, "I'm not convinced."
Oh, wow.
So it was like all the way until the very end.
That's like the kind of thing you hear about happening, like in movies or whatever, but to have that holdout, not really say anything, and then speak up at the end, that must have been kind of annoying for the people who'd been carrying the conversation.
Yep, exactly. We thought it would be a question of going in there and doing, okay, yeah, this is guilty 100%. Let's sign this paper and let's go in. And that did not happen like that. So
I guess I want to ask you, what was your overall impression of the trial, of the jury deliberations? Like, I know technically in most cases nobody wants to be on it to do jury duty, but like, were you satisfied with your service and the conclusion?
yes, 100%. I'm able to sleep at night knowing that I did the right thing.
Is there anything that you want to add about the trial that you'd like us to include in the podcast?
I just think that the whole process was, it was my first time being a juror, and to me it was almost traumatizing. It is a duty that everyone, when called upon, we must do, but my goodness, it took some time for me to just open up and heal and open up, because it was very traumatizing. About a month ago, I went to a birthday party from one of my close friends, and it was his little girl, 4th year old birthday party. She was turning 4, and I started crying. I started crying because it was like it brought back all those images.
I'm kind of glad that I have not had to see those pictures, and I can't imagine what that was like. And I'll just tell you, I don't know if you know this, but like Tony's defense tried to get those photos thrown out of the trial, like not used in the trial. What's your opinion of that? Obviously that would have helped them, but it would have meant that you wouldn't have had to see the pictures. So what are your thoughts on that?
for us, it had to be, it was something that needed to be there for us to examine. And not only because of the crime committed, but also because of the gruesome details of how that family was found, with him living there for almost 3 weeks. It was inconceivable. And I think looking at those very graphic pictures made us paint a better picture of his demeanor. Again, we go back to the matter of fact, the me, and the narcissistic way of him presenting himself. And then going back to our room and looking at those pictures, there was no doubt in my mind, So I think in anyone's mind, it was just a technicality that gentleman was posing. But other than that, we knew for sure that he was guilty.
If you haven't already, please subscribe to Looking for the Todt Family on your favorite podcast app, and don't forget to rate the show. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Looking for the Todt Family is hosted and reported by Sten Spinella, produced by Peter Huapi and Carlos Virgen, written by Sten Spinella and Peter Huapi, editing by Peter Huapi, and music by Carlos Virgen. Tim Cotter is our executive editor, and Izaskun Larnieta is our managing editor. This has been a production of The Day in New London, Connecticut.